Okay, let's start now, Dato.
Okay.
All right. Assalamualaikum and very good day to everyone. I'm Khidzir Ahmad from Malaysia Productivity Corporation and will be the moderator for today's session. Let's kick off the session now with a brief introduction of the event today. We had about 207 people register for the webinar, and I can see now more and more people started to join the session. Welcome to the GRP webinar series on the topic of basics of RIA, organized by MPC. This GRP webinar series is a platform where we bring experts to share information and best practices regarding good regulatory practices. It covered various topics to help policymakers, regulators, businesses, academia, researchers, and interested parties to enhance knowledge on how to improve the quality of regulation without slowing economic growth, innovation, competitiveness, and job creation. Ladies and gentlemen, today's topic is on the basics of regulatory impact analysis, or RIA. RIA is the process of examining the likely impact of a proposed regulation and the range of alternative options which could meet the government's policy objectives, as prescribed in the National Policy on the Development and Implementation of Regulation, or NPDIR. It is a requirement to undertake RIA to all decisions made by the ministries and its agencies that are likely to have a regulatory impact on businesses, trade, and investment. The main objective of this session is to provide an overview of good regulatory practice, GRP, as well as RIA. And our speaker will also briefly explain on all the 7 elements of RIA and how the adoption of all these elements are crucial in the rulemaking process, especially when we are coming up with new or amended regulation. With us today, allow me to introduce our speaker, Yang Berbahagia Dato Ooi Say Chuan. But before that, let me briefly share with all of you a bit of our speakers' CVs today. Yang Berbahagia Dato served with the government service for 33 years, and his last post was as the Deputy Secretary General in Ministry of International Trade and Industry, MITI, in 2008. Post-retirement, Yang Berbahagia Dato held several posts such as the CEO in Malaysia Healthcare Travel Council under the Ministry of Health, and Chairman at the National Standards Committee of Malaysia under Department of Standards Malaysia. Finally, Yang Berbahagia Dato also one of the main figures that was involved in MPC's outreach programs on the introduction of GRP in 2013. And since then, he has been consultant and advisor to MPC on GRP. During this webinar series, during this webinar session, participants are invited to send questions via the question box. So please, if you have any questions and clarifications, send it to the chat box. The speakers at the end of the presentation will address some of the questions received, and we may not have the time to discuss all of them, but I will group or select some of the questions to represent some of your questions. This webinar is being recorded and will be published in our website when it's ready within the next few days. Kindly download also the slide presentation at the handout box. So, without further ado, I would like to invite Yang Berbahagia Dato Ooi Say Chuan to do his presentation.
Okay, thank you, Encik Kid, and I want to thank you for the warm welcome, and especially I also want to thank MPC for inviting me to speak on this topic of regulatory impact assessment. Okay, next. Can I? Okay, regulatory impact assessment. I think maybe some of you are not familiar with even the term regulatory impact assessment. But if I were to say environmental impact assessment, you'll probably be more familiar with EIA, which is the environmental impact assessment. Basically, they are about the same thing. One is assess what is the impact on the environment on a particular action. So in the case of regulatory impact assessment, the idea is to assess the impact of a proposed regulation or amendment to regulation. So it's the approach is the same. So this afternoon, I will try to give you a little bit of background about why there is regulatory impact assessment, then the objective, and then as the moderator said, I'll talk a little bit about the elements and then provide a summary. Yeah, you probably noticed that I use the term regulatory impact assessment. Some use regulatory impact analysis. They are used interchangeably, so no big deal about that. Huh? Okay, next. So by way of background, when we talk about regulatory impact assessment, it is always related to this idea of introducing good regulatory practice. Then the question becomes, what is good regulatory practice? Okay, actually, good regulatory practice is can be said to be a set of international best practice principles or processes, tools, and methods for ensuring quality of regulation. Yeah? And in addition to that, by observing good regulatory practice, countries are also able to observe good governance in a sense that the regulatory process becomes more accountable, transparent, and inclusive. Okay. So as I said, one of the key elements of GRP is regulatory impact assessment, and I'll go into that later. Yeah. Now, in the case of Malaysia, the government launched a national policy on GRP in July 2013. Okay, and in fact, OECD has done an early assessment of Malaysia's practices in terms of good regulatory practice. Okay, next. Next. Okay, so why good regulatory practice? Why the need to engage in good regulatory practice? I would say to a large extent, this has been motivated by the desire of government to facilitate growth and business opportunities by reducing regulatory burdens. If you read the newspaper and so on, you cannot escape but hear the frequent complaints by business communities about how regulations can be a burden to business and how they can stifle business. So then the question becomes, how do we enact regulation, or how do we manage regulations so that they do not necessarily become a burden to business? Okay. Then the aim is, of course, to improve regulatory quality. What do you mean by regulatory quality? Which means that the regulations are effective in achieving what they set out to do, and they are efficient in a sense that they do not impose more costs than necessary on the stakeholders. So this can be done through a series of transparent, accountable, and regulatory processes that can be adopted, and in a way it also makes the regulatory processes more predictable to stakeholders. And this is what stakeholders like. They like the regulatory processes to be predictable in the sense that then they know what to expect from the regulators. Yeah. And the other thing that is the outcome of good regulatory practice is, of course, there will be standardization, greater standardization of the rulemaking process. Yeah. It has been found that rulemaking processes in many countries are not really standardized across the board, in a sense that different regulators will have their own approaches to managing the regulatory processes. For example, some will emphasize public consultation more than others. Some will spend more time on analysis than others, and so on. That seems to be more like a culture or a practice that is peculiar to particular organizations, you know. And so this create actually, in a way, gap and inefficiency in the regulatory making processes. So the idea behind GRP is how can we have greater standardization to ensure quality in the rulemaking processes. Yeah. So in a way, when you have standardization, then you addresses the weaknesses and the gaps in the management of the rulemaking process. Thank you. Next. Now, another dimension to this question of the rulemaking process is the cost. So actually, there was a study done in the United States. They have this annual publication, and I picked up this one, the 10,000 Commandments for the year 2016. And it says that the US federal regulatory cost is about 1.8 trillion in 2005. Okay, and so it attributed this to the number of regulations that are in place. Okay, so as you can see, even the most advanced of economies, even those that we say that are highly unregulated as compared to ours, they too face this question of cost of regulation. Okay, and is that possible? Yeah, it's highly possible, because regulations cover almost every aspect of our life. From the moment you wake up, you drink a cup of water, there is a regulation governing the quality of the water. There is regulation governing the car that you drive. There is regulation that affects the quality of air that you breathe, and so on. So regulation is actually impact a large extent of our daily life. Huh? Thank you. I'll move next, please. So as another illustration, actually MPC has also been very active in dealing with regulatory reform, and in their projects that they have undertaken in the year 2017, they too found that actually among these projects that they have undertaken, MBL stands for Modernizing Business Licensing, RURB is removal of unnecessary regulatory burden, and all these projects that they have undertaken, they estimate that if they are able to make improvement to these projects, they are able to bring about compliance cost savings that runs into millions. All right. Okay. Again, that is because a lot of the regulation touches on a lot of business activities. Okay. Thanks. Next, please. Now, I've been using the word regulation, and if you have been following, the earlier two webinar talk, which was done by two young ladies by the name of Leah Safura and Nick Shafika, which I found it to be very useful. And in their talk, they had actually classified what they call regulations or legislations into two categories. One is primary legislation, and then the other one is secondary legislation. So those of you who have been following that series of talk, when they mentioned regulations, they were referring to the secondary legislation. Usually regulations are made pursuant to the provision of a particular act, which is a primary legislation. But for the case of GRP, good regulatory practice, we use regulation to cover everything. We use the term collectively to refer to any measure or intervention implemented by the government authority that acts to control the behavior of individuals or groups that is within the ambit of the authority. Now, in other words, anything that the government does that you targeted towards directing the behavior of individuals to achieve certain policy objective of the government, right? In the case of the Malaysia Best Practice Regulation Handbook, the regulation has been defined to be any measure of general application in various forms which are undertaken by the ministries, department agencies for which compliance is mandatory. Which means if the government department in Malaysia issue any regulation or guideline and so on, for which they expect the public to comply, then we consider that to be a regulation. Okay. Next. So as you can see, when we talk about regulatory impact assessment, we are actually talking about a whole gamut of activities undertaken by government. Okay. So now we come to the topic for today, which is regulatory impact assessment. As I said earlier, regulatory impact assessment, or RIA, is a central feature of implementing good regulatory practice. So what is it? It is a systematic process of examining the likely impact of a proposed regulation, as well as a range of options that could meet the government's policy objective. Yeah. So not only we are talking about examining the impact, but under RIA, the analyst is also expected to provide the decision maker with a range of options, not just one alternative, but a range of alternatives to choose from. Okay. Now, so this is achieved. This process of better quality of regulation is achieved through sound analysis, informed decision making, and transparency and accountability. So when we say sound analysis, it means a more systematic and rigorous analysis is expected to be conducted throughout the whole regulatory process. Informed decision making, in other words, to ensure that through sound analysis, the decision maker is offered the analysis of the various options for them to make a decision based on the best available information given the time frame that you have. Okay. And transparency and accountability. Here, transparency and accountability refers to during the process of the rulemaking process itself, to be transparent, in other words, to consult the stakeholders. And in the process of consulting the stakeholders, the rulemaking process becomes more accountable. Okay. Next. So what then are the elements of regulatory impact assessment or regulatory impact analysis? Different countries will have different approach, which I will touch on later. But here I'm presenting to you an approach or model that is used by the Australian government, where they have classified or they have grouped these elements into 7. One is problem identification or issue statement, objectives, instrument options, impact analysis, consultation, conclusion, and recommendation, and strategy for implementation. Now, I'm sure many of you who are here listening in this afternoon, if you have attended the public administration course or DPA course, this you will all already recognize, because in public policy administration, these are the kind of actions that are expected to be undertaken. Okay. So I guess the question becomes, what is new? And I would say what is new is that now government actually issues or prepare a handbook or a guideline on the implementation of each of these elements. All right. So, for example, in 2013, when the Malaysian government launched the GRP policy, it also issued a handbook on best practice regulation, such as this. Yeah. Okay. So now you find that the rule-making processes become more structured and formalized, and this helps to improve the quality of the rule-making process. Yeah. But of course, there will be under the new processes, there will be some area which are given new emphasis. And the reason why this new emphasis is given is because through the experience of countries around the world, they found that some of these areas have been neglected. Yeah. Okay. So let me very quickly run through what these 7 elements are. Okay. So problem statement. So actually, problem statement is something very basic, which all public policy making process you are expected to go through. But at the same time, sometimes it is also one that is not given sufficient analysis. Okay. So, for example, when you have a problem with car park, you really need to identify what is the cause. Is the cause of car parking problem because of lack of space, or is it because of people's behavior, or what? So you really need to identify what are the issues that has contributed to car parking problem. Or for example, if you recall, last year there was this huge hue and cry about e-hailing taxi, and the traditional taxi companies and drivers were complaining about the effect on their business because of the e-hailing taxis. So, and they were saying it was taking away their rice bowl and so on. So the question is, should government intervene in such a thing? So you need to identify what is the problem, what is the cause. Although the taxi drivers have complained, but actually you need to go into exactly what is the problem, and then to explain why the government needs to intervene. Of course, that needs to be substantiated with evidence and facts. Okay. So, for example, in the case of the e-hailing taxi, what the government decided to do in the end is to say that, okay, the issue is probably has to do with uneven competition, because the traditional taxi drivers were required to have a PSP license and the e-hailing did not have, and then they didn't have an insurance, whereas the traditional one has, and so on. So when the government came up with a solution, they sought to address these questions about license for the driver, safety, so the cars need to go for checking, similar to the taxis, regular taxis, and so on. So the action taken by the government is not about protecting a particular business. Rather, it is about the public good, which is leveling the competition, looking after public safety, and so on. So that constitutes that part of public policy. So usually public policy is not about protecting a particular business. Okay, and so of course now you have other new businesses coming up, for example, Airbnb and so on. And so the government is also having to look into what are the issues with regards to Airbnb. You will have many stakeholders involved, and each of them will have different perspective of the problem. So should the government intervene? What is the problem? And so on. So these are the kind of things that you need to do. Yeah. Okay. Next. Okay. Yeah. Okay. I think this one is quite obvious. Next, please. Okay. So after you have identified and decided what are the problems and the kind of like the cause of the problem rather than the symptom, then you have to decide on what is the policy outcome that you want. In other words, the desired objective of the proposed action. Okay, and then, for example, if in the case of e-hailing taxi, the desired outcome was to make sure that the safety of passengers must be looked into, must be assured. Then you regulate them from that perspective. And then if the other aspect is to ensure that there is no unfair competition, then you regulate from that perspective. So the desired outcome will be, what are you looking for then? Is it that the prices of taxi fare will drop because of better competition? And so on. So you state what is your desired outcome in specific terms. In specific terms meaning, for example, we are talking about exactly what the outcome is. We are talking about, I think those of you who have been involved will be familiar with the SMART objective. That means they are specific, they are measurable, achievable, and then realistic, and you also state the time. Okay, so you state all this in terms of your objective, so that you can, when you review the effectiveness of the regulation, you can use these measures to help you in the review. Yeah. Okay. Next. The third element, which we mentioned earlier, was what we call the instrument options. This refers to having decided that the objective that you want is to do A, B, and C, then what are the options that are available to the government to implement those objectives? So usually, for the government to act, you actually either you regulate, so we have what we call the regulatory options, or the non-regulatory options. In other words, you educate the public, or you enhance capacity building of your what you call regulators, so that they can implement regulation better. And then when you talk about regulation, regulatory options, you also again have a few options like self-regulation, co-regulation, or explicit government regulation. So self-regulation, normally you allow the industry to regulate themselves, possibly where the risk is low, the impact is low, and so on. So, for example, one of the things you would do is you will encourage the industry to adopt various codes and voluntary practices such as industry standards, ISO standards, and so on. Yeah, of course, explicit government regulation would be things like what they call the regulation that is being used now for the MCO, the Prevention and Control of Diseases Act. Okay, and from there you can issue various regulation. Okay. Now, another feature of the options, as you can see right at the very top, is what we call to do nothing. In other words, the regulator, when you offer the options that you analyze for the decision maker, you also do an analysis of what happens if no action is taken. So this becomes the baseline scenario and provide the baseline data, meaning, let's say, if you don't do anything over the next 5 years, what do you expect to happen? You know, so that it forms some kind of baseline of comparison for the decision maker in deciding whether or not to intervene. Next. So here I'll just quickly mention that I think the important point is to make sure that when the options are provided to the decision maker, it must be meaningful option, meaning the options that you present to the decision maker here, most countries says minimum 3 options, which means you have the option of not doing anything, and then you have 2 other options. And we need to ensure that the 2 other options besides doing nothing are meaningful, meaning each of them on its own will be able to help solve the problem. You know, so it has to be meaningful and then feasible. Yeah, and then there are other elements to consider, like proportionate, whether the solution that you are proposing is proportionate to the risk or the size of the problem. Okay. Next. Okay, the fourth element, is impact analysis. Now, as you realize now, we have come to already presentation of elements, of options, and so from the options that you have identified, then you need to do an analysis of each of the options. Okay, so analysis from the perspective of financial, social, or environmental impact, or whichever factors that you consider to be relevant. All right. So during impact analysis, you also need to look at which groups are affected. And of course, one of the issues of impact analysis is data, quantitative data. And so to the extent possible, to use quantitative data. And where it is not possible, then qualitative data. But whichever case that you do, they need to be evidence-based. Yeah? Not something that you take action based on or anecdotal basis. Yeah. Okay. So some countries, they also say that when you do an impact analysis of the proposed action of government, you also need to consider the impact on competition and the impact on small businesses. Okay, so this is to give you an idea of what impact analysis would cover. And from what I understand, it is one of the most difficult area. Yeah. Okay. Okay. Next. So when you talk about identifying doing impact analysis, then you're talking about identifying the cost and benefit, right? And so in terms of benefit, it usually refers to the desired outcome, such as the ones that I've listed there. For example, whether it's for health and safety, for consumer protection, for environment, or even for economic related issues like improving consumer choice, healthier competition, and so on. Yeah. So this would be the kind of things that the government would intervene in. Then you need to identify the cost. Cost will be what would be how would the proposed action impact on business, on consumer, on the community, even on the government, which will be like cost of administrating the regulation, cost of enforcement, and so on. Yeah. Okay. So you will find that actually there are various tools to help in impact analysis. You have, of course, the cost-benefit analysis, the more popular one, the CBA, and then you have cost-effectiveness analysis. The cost-effectiveness analysis tend to be useful when you are not able to you are able to identify the cost, but you are not able to quantify effectiveness in terms of cost. But you are able to quantify effectiveness in terms of unit, for example. And so, for example, how much would be a change in the regulation, the cost compared to a unit of improvement, for example, rather than trying to find out what is the cost of the unit of improvement. Yeah? Okay. Whereas cost-benefit analysis tend to require you to have both the quantitative data for cost and quantitative data for benefits. Okay, and then you have another approach, which is multi-criteria analysis. Okay, so there are numerous analyses, and actually, when you're undertaking regulatory impact assessment, sometimes it's not just one. You use a few in combination to assist in making sure that the analysis is thorough and it can withstand scrutiny. Yeah. Okay. Remember, the idea is always to go back to the idea of providing the decision maker with sufficient information to make informed decision. Okay. Next. Okay. This slide I'm putting forward is because in some countries they have taken to adopt a different approach to doing regulatory reform or GRP, and here they focus in terms of cost of regulation just on compliance cost. How much does it cost to comply to the introduction of a new regulation? So here they are talking about looking at financial costs, administrative burden, and substantive compliance costs. So substantive compliance costs, meaning if the new regulation is introduced, what will be involved in terms of installation of new machinery, employing of new workers, and so on. Those will be the substantive costs. Administrative burden will be what kind of record keeping, what kind of data collection will be required of the organization in complying with the cost. And then, of course, you have financial costs, which will be what are the fees, what are the taxes, and what are the charges that they have to pay as a result of the introduction of this cost. So as you can see, this is what they call a simpler approach that is being used by some countries. Some countries have actually even adopted even simpler approach, and they just focus on administrative burden. Yeah, meaning, and usually the focus on administrative burden is when they are talking about review of regulations, review of existing regulations. Okay, next. So the fifth element, consultation. Okay, this is also under GRP. This is also an area that need to be given emphasis. Need to be given emphasis because I think you will find that even in Malaysia, the practice of consultation seems to differ quite widely between different regulators. Okay, and so as a result, it also have impact on the quality of regulation. Okay, and today you have to realize that the stakeholders, the public, expect to be consulted. Okay, if they are not consulted, they will be quite vocal about it. Yeah? I think if you recall last year when the government made amendment to a regulation with regards to allowing the vehicle tinting for the back portion of the car, the back windows and the of the car, there was quite a bit of unhappiness voiced by stakeholders, including the police. Yeah, okay. So they felt that they were not consulted. Yeah, okay, and so on. So you can look into that. I will not go into detail. Yeah, okay. So and there are of course a lot of all these benefits if you do consultation. You reduce the risk of policy failure. Encourage public commitment and so on. So actually in 2012, the government actually in Malaysia already issued a circular to request or direct government agencies that they should undertake online consultation. Yeah, okay. So in fact, another feature I would say that has come about as a result of good regulatory practice is that the idea of introducing closure report or consultation report. I've not put, I forgot to include that in the slide, but consultation report or closure report is a report published by the regulators at the end of the consultation to inform stakeholders what have we done with the views that you have offered. So this is to ensure that regulators take into account the views of stakeholders. If you are going to encourage them to participate in public consultation, then you need to let them know that their views that they have taken the effort to share with you is considered. Whether you accept the views or not is a different thing. Yeah, it doesn't mean the regulator have to accept everything that is offered, but you need to listen and consider it. So what they want to know is, have you considered my view? Okay. Next. So on online consultation, what has been happening in a number of countries is that they have decided to introduce what we call unified public consultation. Yeah. So so in Malaysia we have also introduced this UPC, which is online unified public consultation, which I think there will be a separate session on that later. But the whole idea behind this is that you can go to one portal, and there, whatever regulatory consultation that the government wants to undertake, you can find it there. Rather than trying to go and find them in the various websites of the regulators. Okay, there are some advantages to this. Okay, next. Yeah, next. Okay, I will try to give you some time for question and answer. Okay, conclusion and recommendation. I think this part is fairly straightforward. Yeah. Last, next. Next. strategy for implementation, which is the seventh element. Now, strategy for implementation, again, this is one aspect that the studies on GRP, the experience of people who want to implement GRP, what they find is that traditionally there isn't sufficient emphasis on looking into strategy for implementation. It is there, but usually it is not presented for consideration of the decision maker. In other words, the decision maker is presented with the options to implement certain solution, but when it comes to the implementation plan, it is assumed that it will be done. Yeah? But there are a lot of issues with regards to implementation that needs to be considered as well. You know, so even that needs to be at least put up for the information of the decision maker, so that they make decision on an informed basis. Again, I would like to stress, making decision on an informed basis. So for example, if you are doing implementation, is the implementation going to be done by your own organization, or is it the implementation is going to be farmed out by another organization? What is the strategy for ensuring compliance? And this will have to talk about resource requirement. Very often, the issue of resource requirement is assumed that it will be taken care of, but sometimes it is not. You know, and then again, another issue is what are you going to do to detect non-compliance? Is it going to be a risk-based kind of inspection, 100% inspection, and so on and so forth? Yeah, and also including communication plan to the affected parties. How long ahead are you going to inform the affected parties so that they are aware of what's coming? So all these forms are elements, the 7 elements of RIA. Okay. As I was saying, the 7 elements, you probably recognize that it's already, if by going through it, you would have gone through the full cycle of public policy making. Yeah. And so what I guess what is new is now under GRP and under this era of regulatory reform is the idea of putting these things in some kind of guideline and handbook, structuring it and formalizing it for the policymakers. Okay, because rather than just traditionally you attend a course in Intan about public policy making, and then when you go back to your organizations, well, you're supposed to do it, you know, but the organization will have its own culture. Some organization may not what you call practice certain elements. For example, the analysis may not be as thorough. For example, consultation may not be as wide, and so on. So by having some kind of guideline and a handbook, that will help to standardize it. Yeah. And of course, as I said, it contributes to better governance, transparency, and accountability, because through the consultation process, there will be greater transparency in the decision making. Analysis will be shared, and then stakeholders are able to offer their views as well. Not only transparency in terms of analysis, but also transparency in terms of the process. Yeah? So that you will enable stakeholders to get involved. Yeah? And I would like to say that the various practices that are found in GRP, whether it's in OECD or in World Bank, these are a collection of best practices. Okay, and it is not, and so when countries practice the GRP, for example, earlier I mentioned some of them just focus on analyzing administrative burden, some focus on compliance costs and all that. So this shows us that there is no one size fit all in terms of implementing the GRP. Okay, some implement the GRP very comprehensively. For example, like Australia, yeah, all regulations are covered. Okay, and the other thing I also would like to share is that the best practices for GRP is also evolving. Yeah. So, for example, some of those countries that we find that they are in the leaders of practicing GRP, they are also improving their practices. For example, in Australia now they have a two-stage RIA approach. Traditionally, it was just one, but now they have a two-stage approach. Okay. And then they also have the issue of whether light RIA or full RIA and all that. So these are all evolving practice. But having said that, it does not mean that we should wait for the best practices to be perfect, you know, because even as it is with its best practices evolving, countries can still benefit from adopting the various practices under the GRP. Okay, so I think I will stop here. Sorry, I've taken, I think, slightly more time than I expected. So if you have any question, thank you.
First of all, thank you, Dato, for your short presentation on the basics of RIA. Yes, we have been receiving quite a number of questions since the beginning of your presentation. But first, let me address and say thanks to those few people who raised their hand. We will get to your question later, okay? And first and foremost, Dato, the first question to you is from Puan Khairani Yusof. Is it a good practice to amend the law regularly? Some might say the law is bad law, so needs to be amended when in true fact, any good law must evolve and need to be at par with international standard.
Yeah. Okay. When you say regularly, I guess what do you mean by amending the law regularly? Yeah? Okay. Of course, yeah. We say that regulations. In fact, one of the feature of GRP is that you are encouraged or I would say required to review your regulations regularly. And we say, let's say once in 5 years, you know, once in every 5 years, review your regulation to see whether it is still effective, whether it has achieved its objective. All right. So what happens if you find that you review and it did not achieve its objective? Naturally, you will want to do something about that regulation. All right. So yes, you need to do the review, but on the other hand, I also need to, speaking from experience, it's not easy to amend a regulation. Reviewing is one thing, amending it is another thing, because if amending it requires, for example, to go to Parliament, then it's going to be a long queue going into Parliament. But if amending the regulation is merely requiring, let's say, the approval of the minister and, of course, sometimes the cabinet, then it's relatively easier process. Yeah.
Okay, we'll go to the second question, Dato. It's from Puan Rosiana. RIA has been used more over the last few years. OECD countries had comprehensive RIA implementation. In contrast, OECD reported that some developing countries beginning to apply RIA, but their methods are generally incomplete and not applied systematically across policy areas. What is your opinion on this in the case of Malaysia perspective?
Okay, I think one is in developing countries, what I understand, one of the issue many of them face is the issue of capacity capacity to undertake the kind of in-depth analysis that are supposed to be undertaken, right? And many of the OECD countries, let's say you take United States or Australia and New Zealand, they actually have embarked on GRP years ago, 20, 30 years ago. And of course, if you compare to them today, compare the developing country with them today, you will find that the implementation by the developing countries are still far short from what these countries are doing. Okay, so like I said, it has to do with capacity. Secondly, it also has to do with awareness. Awareness by top management that because of the emphasis on transparency, accountability, there has to be what I call a willingness to share information, and sometimes many of the countries still have problems with sharing information because you have classified information, you have Official Secrets Act, and then the analysts will be wondering, okay, am I allowed to share this or not? You know, so that creates a problem for them as well. But we have to go back and ask, actually, are those information really confidential? You know, it may be classified confidential, but if it is not confidential and it is within the authority of the regulator to declassify those information, then they should be able to declassify. The Official Secrets Act is there, but it also allows the whoever classified it as confidential to declassify it if the need arises.
All right. Let's go to the next question, Dato.
Yeah.
If you don't mind.
Yes.
Okay. Very interesting question here we have. From Puan Karani Yusof again. Sometimes there is no problem statement, but because of directive from the government to comply with the international standard and because of rating, what is your say on that?
This one you have to be, I guess, look at things specifically and say, yes, is it true that there's no problem? Okay. So it's kind of difficult to generally to say that there is no problem. But in terms of complying with international practices, for example, if, for example, a country has signed up to some international treaty, international convention and agreement, then of course you want to have that regulation in place. But from what I remember, normally before you go and agree to meet with these international standards, you would have got the approval of the cabinet before you say, yes, we are going to accept, and once you accept, come back and prepare the regulation. Okay. If you say, should we do it because of rating? Yeah. The question is, what is it that you are doing because of rating? You know what I mean? If you are doing something which solve a problem, at the same time improves your rating, why not? Unless you are saying you are doing something that is not solving any problem.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay. Thanks.
All right. Thanks for your answers. Okay, we proceed to the next questions. It's from Miss Wani. The question goes like this: in the COVID-19 season, will regulatory controls help in economic recovery? In the COVID-19 season like this we're having now, regulatory controls help in economic recovery?
I suppose this covers so wide an area. For example, if you don't have regulatory control, for example, MCO is a regulatory control, okay? And if you don't have the regulatory control, then the diseases, the spread of the disease will not be controlled, right? And therefore the economy impact is going to be worse, right? So bearing in mind that the country needs to, of course, take care of its economy, right? So regulatory control can help you ease out the control that you have put in place. But now that you have mentioned about what you call COVID and regulatory control, if you observe now, there's of course a lot of people also doing internet shopping. Yeah? A lot of transaction going on the internet because of this COVID and MCO. You know, okay. So of course, then you have to also ask the question: are the regulations for what you call online transaction, whether it's banking or just purchasing, you know, are they robust enough to protect the interests of the consumer? You know, because previously maybe we haven't paid sufficient attention. For example, when immediately when the MCO started, if you read in the papers, a number of people who said, oh, they started to purchase the face mask, and then a number of them say they got conned buying things on the face mask and all this. You know. So with more and more people going into internet transaction, does it mean there will be also more cases of internet fraud? You know? So are our existing regulatory environment in the internet space as good as the regulatory environment that we have, the regulatory regime that we have in the brick and mortar space? So these are some of the things that can come about. You know.
Okay, we have time for one more question, and this question came from Miss Liana Hazwani. Would Dato suggest any good references or books pertaining to RIA for those who are still new in this area?
I have one. I was holding on to one book just now. You give me a minute. I just go and grab it and I show it to you. Is that okay? I don't.
Yeah.
It's actually called. It's actually called RIA, and it is a collection of articles, very good articles by practitioners as well as by academics assessing RIA. Yeah, just give me
maybe
seconds.
Dato can share with us. You can share with us the reference later. We'll share with.
Okay. Yeah, I'll do that. I'll do that.
Okay. One more question. From Miss Shariza, does RIA required for primary legislation?
Okay. Some countries, it depends on different countries and their practices. Some countries do not require RIA for primary legislation. So, like I said, there's no one size fit all. Okay. For example, if you take in the United States, act that is passed by Congress does not go through this kind of analysis, right? It is only those that are passed by the agencies like the Environmental Protection Agency and FDA and all that. But if they are initiated at the Congress level, then primary legislation they don't need to go through. So it's actually the choice of the government. Yeah. Some do. I think in Australia they do primary legislation also. They go through RIA.
Okay. Thank you, Dato, for all the question and answers. And with that, it ends the question and answer sessions. I will thank you again to Ahmad Dato for your presentation and for your feedbacks on the questions shared by the audience. And ladies and gentlemen, a thank you note will be sent together with a survey form, and appreciate if you could all complete it and for us to further improve our sessions later. If you'd like to know more about RIA, we would like to welcome you all to join our virtual advisory clinic, or VAC, where we will explain again the 7 elements of RIA tailored to your specific sector's needs and preferences. Kindly register by visiting MPC website, and we are looking forward for your participation. And next week, we'll be organizing 2 GRP seminar series. First is on the 4th of May on the topic Keeping Singapore Ticking, the COVID-19 Temporary Measures Act 2020. And on the 8th of May, the topic is Understanding Public Consultation in Malaysia, Part 1. And finally, last but not least, thank you to all 174 attendees for your participation. And I'm wishing, on behalf of MPC, I'm wishing all of you happy Labor Day. Okay, and see you again. Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye-bye.